our panel. That is by the panelists. Your moderator, Mr. Ali Segatawa, we welcome you in front here. Good afternoon, sir. But your panel is supposed to be moderated by Mr. Elson Karuhanga. I don't know whether... Oh, you're most welcome, Mr. Elson Karuhanga. You could take up the charge and welcome the panel for the discussion. Thank you.
Hello. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It is my singular honor and privilege to be here today and to be moderating over this very eminent and distinguished panel. Please allow me to invite first Mr. Ali Sekatawa. Please put your hands together for Ali. Ali is the Director of Legal and Corporate Affairs, I believe. He's the Head Legal and Corporate Affairs of the Petroleum Authority of Uganda. He's a former taxman. I don't know if it's former or current. He's a highly regarded lawyer, well-read, well-accomplished, extremely skilled, very versatile, extremely knowledgeable, and utterly patriotic. Please put your hands together for Ali. We have Barbara Daisy Nabweke. Barbara, please come to the front. Barbara is, as of today, the head of contracts and negotiation. She's coming. You can be putting your hands together as she comes. Barbara is the head of contracts and negotiation for the Uganda National Oil Company. She's also a seasoned lawyer. She was once in Standard Chartered Bank, if I'm correct. Barbara, I'm correct. There's a time you were in Stanchart. She also worked for Tullow Oil back in that day, so she has a deep experience in the oil and gas industry. And starting from tomorrow, she's going to be ECOP. So she's, I think we can congratulate right now, a director of the East African Crude Oil Pipeline. I'm sure many activists are very happy for her. So on behalf of everybody here, congratulations, Barbara. She's going to be the head of legal, company secretary, director, although we have to check the corporate governance rules there. But anyhow, congratulations to Barbara. The next panelist is Sandra Mwesije. Sandra is, I think, head of legal at the Chinese National Offshore Oil Company, CNOOC. She also had a stint with the Attorney General of Uganda on the public service side, and now she decided to leave the public sector and work in the Chinese public sector. We have Mr. Aaron Kiza, although I have not seen Aaron. Aaron Kiza. Okay. When Aaron comes, he'll come to the front. Aaron is a partner at Kiza and Mugisha and Company Advocates, a good friend, a fierce advocate for the environment, a rights activist, and a fantastic lawyer in every respect. I think we also have Paul Bagabo. Paul is a senior officer of the Natural Resource Governance Institute. So he makes sure that there is governance in the natural resources. Our panel is going to be talking about, has Aaron arrived? Maybe not. When he comes, he shall come up. Our panel is going to be discussing legal practice in a changing society, addressing the emerging challenges and opportunities. As we sit here, this country is on the cusp of producing its first barrel of oil. We are in the process of securing maybe the first refinery actually in this part of the world. We are in the process of constructing maybe the longest heated crude oil pipeline on earth. We are in the process of many fasts at a time of great fasts. The great fast being the energy transition, the move away from fossils. So on the one hand, there is great opportunity. On the other hand, there is great expectation. And if there was a third hand, there would be great anxiety. Fortunately, the panel we have today is able to take us through. And so maybe I'll start with Ali. Please, if Aaron comes, he can come straight to the front. But Ali, I'll start with you. And maybe you can tell us about Uganda's transition plan and the status also of this transition.
Okay. Thank you, Ellison, for that generous introduction. And good afternoon to our colleagues here. One is from where I stand, which is Petroleum Authority. It's good for me first to share the good news, which is that our project as Ugandans is on course. The oil project has 3 or 4 key legacy projects. It has the upstream part, which is Kingfisher, being taken forward by CNOOC, which is here. And as of today, that one is on course in respect to all the integrated items that are supposed to be done in that project. The central processing facilities, the flow lines, and the wells that are supposed to be drilled. The second is Tilenga, which is taken forward by Total. Tilenga is like 4 times bigger than Kingfisher. Again, it has so many other integrated items there. And as of today, because we are chasing first oil 2025, it is on course. The third is ECOP, which is the pipeline from Hoima to Tanga. Again, as of today, close to 500 kilometers of pipes have been delivered in Tanzania for coating, and all the other processes, including land. Land is almost at 99%, and the other ones have started their own course. The refinery, we are currently in negotiations with a new investor, having run through the last 4 years with the last investor. So the good news is that generally we are okay. And the fifth are what we call the support infrastructure, which is the second international airport. It's above 99. There are just a few issues for it to be commissioned. And then the 8 oil roads, all of them are almost complete. The power line in Kenda is already there, and the ICT are there. Is already there, and the other integrated support infrastructure. So the first is to share the good news, because as you can see, we have a very minor very small group of people who still dream that they can stop that project. So I wanted to start there. The second is that because of the climate discussion now, then I will land into your question of the energy transition based on the requirement for the world to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. And that energy transition now mostly identified the fossil fuels as one of the key drivers of that greenhouse gas emissions. So the question we have is that whereas the world is now asking, how do you reduce the emissions, Uganda is just starting first oil. And that's where the whole debate of saying, leave your oil underground and do not develop it. So what have we done? We've worked with the International Energy Council to develop what is called the Uganda Energy Transition Plan. It is online now, and it has 3 pillars. Those pillars are based, one, it acknowledging the fact that we have to exploit our oil in a sustainable manner for us to be able to get revenue to transition. The second, we have acknowledged, and I'm aware later there is a discussion on minerals, that we have the rare minerals that are needed for the energy transition debate. Because when you're going for electric cars, you need lithium and all those minerals which you're going to use for solar panels and so on. Good enough, we are lucky that we have them. So again, there is another structure, including the review of the minerals policy and so on, to enable us exploit those minerals. And the third is the emphasis on energy access, which is electricity and so on for all, and that is, again, ongoing. In terms of opportunities, I was in COP28, and one of the key issues was this energy transition discussion, and I think the country is committed close to $178 billion US for that discussion. And what does it mean? It means that that money is around for projects that can answer that green discussion. Whether you're working in oil and gas, you should be able to look at it and come up with solutions, whether legal or in terms of structuring, that answer that. And then the fact that we should all know that all these other spaces of rare minerals, the space of wind, the space of solar and hydro and hydrogen, there are many projects that are going to come all over the world that are focusing into those areas. So in my view, I think from a global perspective, it is that opportunity. From our side, it is the opportunity that comes with the exploitation of oil and gas, because that project is going to go forward. I think I could maybe stop there. Thank you.
Thank you, Ali, for that very elaborate answer. And maybe I'll go next to Barbara. So Barbara, Ali has set the ground how we are transitioning to clean energy. And I think one question that he has left, which I think you can answer for us, is as we start these big projects on the one hand, and as we transition on the other, mustn't we address the elephant in the room? Are fossil fuels still relevant?
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you, Ellison, for that question, and thank you, Ali, for setting the scene. I think all of us, as we sit here and ponder on whether we should just go green starting today, we have to ask ourselves the question of affordability. Is Uganda ready? Is Uganda ready? Today, if His Excellency wakes up and says, I expect all Ugandans now to own electric cars, do we have money to be able to go and purchase these vehicles? So for me, I answer that in the affirmative by saying fossils are relevant, not just for today, but for many years to come. And as Ali has rightly pointed out, the National Energy Transition Plan that Uganda has put in place has recognized that aspect. We are not going to stop exploiting the oil and gas that Uganda has discovered. It's a commercial finding that is going to help Uganda to address energy poverty. Today, we still have communities that don't even have access to power. Where my grandparents live, when I go there, I actually have to go with a generator, go with all manner of things to make sure that I have light. Uganda has not yet been connected even to hydro. So it's very important for us to acknowledge that the fossils are going to play a critical role. We all agree that renewables are going to come in. There is a clear plan, as Ali has pointed out, that we need to guarantee certain things. Accessibility, efficiency, sustainability, and security. So those are 4 cornerstones of energy transition. We cannot just wake up and shut a particular door and open another because there is hydrogen, there is solar, there is wind. It cannot happen. One, we need to retool, prepare for that new journey, but also we need to get somewhere. So our oil that is in the ground is going to be exploited. No amount of stop ECOP, stop exploration is going to stop us all but the country from going there, because we acknowledge that we cannot even today afford electrifying the entire country at once. So we need the investment. We need the investment, and oil and gas is going to start and open up many of these other sectors that Uganda is involved in, including agriculture. The products that come from oil, once we have the refinery, there will be petrochemical industries that will be set up. These are going to create jobs for us. Even today, I am proud to be employed in the oil and gas sector, and there are many of us, because it has created direct, indirect, and also induced jobs. So there are so many opportunities that are coming from the fossils today, which we need to still partake of before we can think of transitioning and embarking on our journey of renewable energy. It doesn't mean that Uganda is not doing anything, but we want to acknowledge that even the countries that are pushing us to immediately go for green energy, go for hydrogen, go for solar, go for wind, they also started somewhere. They have industrialized. They industrialized and they were able to create jobs for their people. They were able to evolve in terms of the infrastructure. So we cannot be stopped. Our GDP is going to improve once 2025 comes in and we are able to export our oil. We are going to reduce the amount of money we spend out there importing fertilizers because we shall have our own. So I will say in the affirmative that actually we need the fossils. There are many byproducts and we don't yet have replacement for those byproducts, including plastics. Today there is no option that has been put in the table that can actually replace the plastics, and all those are byproducts of oil and gas. I think I'll stop there, but the answer is in the affirmative. Thank you.
Thank you, Barbara. The answer is in the affirmative. Fossils are still relevant. Sandra, seeing that fossils, according to Barbara, are still relevant, what role can oil and gas companies play in this energy transition?
Thank you, Ellison, and thank you to the audience and to my distinguished panelists. I just want to add on to what has already been said. I believe oil and gas still has a key role to play in the energy mix for at least the next 40, maybe even to 60 years. And obviously, we're in the developing world, so the energy needs are great, as has already been touched on by my colleagues. The energy needs are great, in especially a country like Uganda. And so that means that oil and gas companies have a vital role to play in supporting a country like Uganda in its journey to energy transition. And anyway, energy transition varies from country to country. Every country is on its own, it's having its own energy transition journey. We can't all be like Sweden or Norway. Uganda has to have its own energy transition. So oil and gas companies can play a key role because they have a lot of advantages. For instance, in helping the country to meet its transition goals, the companies can reduce greenhouse gas emissions because we all recognize that fossil fuels contribute to greenhouse gas emissions. But through improving efficiency in operations, you can minimize greenhouse gas emissions and help the countries to meet their own targets. Through, like in Uganda, the laws are quite strict about flaring. So flaring is burning the excess gas that comes out during oil production. So if we have those strict laws against flaring, the oil companies are forced to find other ways of utilizing that gas, which leads to products like LPG, LNG, which are very, very vital for helping improve the lives of ordinary Ugandans by moving them away from biomass, wood and charcoal, and devastation of our natural environment because they are seeking for cheap sources of fuel. So if we have LPG, which is clean cooking gas, available for cooking and also for lighting homes and for industrial use, already the oil companies are helping the countries to meet their energy transition goals and to help us all have a cleaner world. Oil companies have the technology to bring out things like hydrogen, which is supposed to be a key enabler for energy transition, because hydrogen is low carbon and it can be used in heavy industries and for heavy duty transport. Also, the companies can develop technologies like carbon capture and storage, which is very helpful for helping us get closer to a zero carbon world. This is a key technology that can be utilized to help to reduce the greenhouse gases and lower the carbon dioxide emissions that are in the atmosphere. By trying to do green oil and gas projects, for instance, using energy efficient methods during extraction and drilling, electrification of the projects, using modern technologies like enhanced oil recovery, we can have greener projects that can help the countries to also meet their targets and help us in our journey of energy transition. So I believe oil companies have a lot to contribute to energy transition, and they're already doing their part. They're already playing a big role. They have a lot of expertise and technology that can be used to even help in renewables. A lot of the renewables are going to rely on the expertise that has been developed over the last 100 years in the oil and gas industry. And so, yeah, I'll just leave it at that for now and add more later. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. I think we have seen a recent example, the purchase by Total Energies of Bujagali.
Yeah.
So, Paul, civil society, governance, the role, we have heard of the role of companies in the transition. What about the role of civil society in helping keep the companies accountable and at the same time in ensuring good governance and transparency? What role can they play in this?
Thank you very much. Maybe first I should say that Uganda is in a really good position. That we're about to start producing oil, but we also have minerals that will be on demand for use in the energy transition. Why I say we're in a good position, because there are two types of transitions. There's the first transition, where a number of countries have committed to reducing fossil fuels by 2030. And then there's the slow transition, where other countries, especially developing countries, have been given an offer to reduce fossil fuels by 2050 towards 2060. And we know that our oil production really will last until around 2050 at the earliest. And so we still have an opportunity to trade in our oil while the demand is there. But there are also a few challenges that we don't actually control. We will not consume most of our oil. We'll consume about 60,000 barrels. So the rest will have to be exported. And we have a challenge that we don't have control over the markets where we'll export most of our oil. And so those markets, as the demand falls, will have two impacts. The first one is the price of oil might fall. The second is that the capital to invest in the oil projects will start dwindling. And so what we need to do now is to be very careful with the money that comes out of the oil sector so that we can use it well to finance the transition. Of course, you've talked about the 170 billion committed, but most of that money hasn't come, even in countries where they already signed agreements. And so we shouldn't expect that money to come. What we need to do is to manage the money that is coming out of the oil sector better. And maybe that's where the role of stakeholders, non-government stakeholders can come in, where they need to understand this very well, that the energy transition will have opportunities but also risks. And so they can have a good engagement with government, not to invest sustainably and to invest in projects that will return, bring a return on the investment so that we can be able to finance the transition. So that's on one hand. On the other hand, to ensure that the transition is just, and it's inclusive and consultative so that the decisions that we make will benefit the majority of people. As you know, in Uganda, we have a high percentage of renewables in our energy mix. So we're not really badly off. But access and cost are very important. That's one. Two, that our biggest problem is moving the majority of our population from biomass and wood to renewables, really. But the cost of that movement is quite very high. And so we need to make sure that government takes that into consideration, that most people might not be able to afford that. Then on the part of companies, as you know, we might not transit directly from biomass to renewables. We might have to use gas as an intermediate product, as a bridge in the transition. So we think that oil companies can play a big role in financing the capture and production of gas as a bridging kind of energy source, especially for cooking. And that is a very expensive venture. Many governments don't have the money to do so, and borrowing has become very expensive. And so oil companies can play a role in capturing the excess gas so that they can turn it into LPG and support a transition, a just transition. I think that's what I can say for now. So for non-government actors, their role is for government to allow them to engage with them. That's one, because as you know, there is a problem with civic space. But that's not the biggest problem. The biggest problem is for them to understand this very well, that they can engage effectively with government. Government has a lot of information, and they find that they don't have the time to teach. So civil society has to come with some knowledge, something on the table. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. I think here at Law Society, we are always able to facilitate the dialogue between all sectors of public, private, non-governmental. I wanted to go into another round of questions, but I think it would only be fair. I don't know how much time we have left. I think it would be fair to hand over that time to the audience in case anybody has questions. I have very many questions, and we can have this conversation for a very long time. The role of different actors, the stage of the transition, the value of fossils, the role of lawyers in the new dispensation. But instead of me asking my questions, if there's anybody who has a question, it would be good to hear from the audience so we can have as interactive an opportunity with this very distinguished panel as possible. If no one does, I can ask. Is the microphone with me?
Thank you to our distinguished panel of eminent lawyers in that space of yours that is, very, what do I call it? Oil and gas is the subject of the day in this country, and we are all excited. However,
introduce yourself.
Oh, sorry. My name is Anne Karunji, a senior advocate. If you're not a Ugandan, or if you just flew into this country, then you will understand that the question of the day in this country, or the issue that we are grappling with, is the rampant corruption. Now, as a concerned Ugandan, I speak for the majority of the Ugandans to say, how sure are we? This seems very good on paper. Yes, we are excited. The oil is coming up tomorrow. It will bring so many benefits with it. Unemployment, cure the unemployment question, bring about a lot of advancement in several sectors of the economy. But the cancer of corruption, we cannot hide from the fact that, who knows, won't the money go into the hands of a few? Won't the money be channeled out of the country? How do we Ugandans, what is your say in the midst of this corruption that we are grappling with as a country? Won't we just hear about the oil and tell our generations, Munange Uganda, we got oil? But things remained the same. Actually, the people in the oil region became the poorest. So I would like that to be tackled. Thank you. Then another thing is, are there systems where these experts, or the expertise that comes with these foreign companies, in line with the local content, is being transitioned onto Ugandans through training? For example, we bring in the experts, and we need their expertise, and we say, you will train our people. Then after 2-3 years, we shall say, thank you very much, bye. You can get onto your plane. Are there systems in place like that? Thank you.
Yes, I think we'll take another question, but please, you now limit them to one. In answering, I think Ali will take on that question as the regulator in the sector. And the questions, if I can summarize them, are just two. Do you have systems for transitioning employees? I think there must be, because as I told you, tomorrow, Barbara is becoming the boss of ECOP. So there must be. But the other question is, won't the money be stolen? So I think there's a question here. Or here. So we'll do this. We'll take his question, her question, and then I think that'll be, okay, there'll be another question at the back, but we'll first answer those, then we'll take one from there and one from there. Please make your questions short, nice, sweet, and precise. Assume it's a cross-examination.
Thank you, moderator. I want to appreciate the panelists for the insights.
And introduce yourself.
My name is Daniel Nasasira, and I'm an advocate. I work with the Uganda Registration Services Bureau. There are quite a number of entities that are being registered and taking up opportunities in this field of oil and gas. My question is, we just had a panel just before we went out for lunch of judicial officers and senior counsel, and there was a discussion about the court backlog and all these types of cases that are going to court. And there were suggestions from some of the panelists of having specialized courts to handle some of these technical disputes like construction and that kind of thing. Bundling it up in the commercial court sometimes is a bit tricky because the judges sometimes actually do not have not read about some of these areas that much. So you find they are interacting with these for the first time. So I'm asking on behalf of the young lawyers and senior lawyers, because this is relatively a new area of practice. Number one, what did you as experts in this field do differently to position yourselves for this sector? Did you study any special courses? Because this is not an area that is of interest in law schools in Uganda today. So what did you do differently to position yourself for these opportunities that you are currently...
Okay, so
and then
that's
number
your
two,
question.
sorry, number two, yes.
You know, because don't make a speech. A question.
Yes.
So you have asked, what did you do?
Yes.
Then number two, not a speech.
Yes.
A question.
And then number two, for the entities, the companies and different organizations that are registering to come on board and offer services, and what are the opportunities available for them?
So,
thank you.
Two questions. What did you do, and what are the opportunities? So I'll share those questions. Barbara, what are the opportunities? Sandra, what did you do? You will answer. Introduction. I also want to clarify. We're all young lawyers here, please.
Thank you, Ellison. My name is Dorothy Nanduka Kabgo. I'm a partner at Otis Advocates, where I lead the energy, natural resources, and infrastructure team. I'm glad to see our distinguished panelists, and thank you for sharing those insights. Many colleagues keep asking what it is they need to do to participate in the bidding rounds. I think it would be fair to us this afternoon for you to break it down. For those of us who have participated in that process, it is not very easy. So if you can shed some light for them. But we have also seen situations where those bidding documents ask for too much, especially in light of the fact that the sector is quite new and we are just in the process of building the experience. So they may need a bit of review to tone it down a bit for us to be able to benefit from the local content provisions that our law provides. But also I'd like Ali, my colleague there, to paint a picture for us on where we are in our local content journey. I know that so much has been said about so much money has been brought into the country and Ugandans have participated, but where are we? Because PAU tracks these opportunities and the participation levels. Thank you.
By bidding rounds, you're talking about bidding for oil blocks?
Bidding for provision of services in the oil and gas sector.
Oil and gas sector. So I think Ali may still have to take that, and Paul may also have to answer that as well. I think at this stage, let's take some answers. We have one more there. So this is going to be the last round of questions then. That will be the last person. That gentleman there is a very serious lawyer, Harvard-trained lawyer, very highly educated gentleman, well known as the son of Loyola, but he can introduce himself.
Thank you. My name is Ferdinand Tumhaise from Kampala Associated Advocates. My question, I think, maybe either actually it captures all of the people there. One is the question of funding. We have a lot of hullabaloo around stop ECOP, stop funding. We have had even cases litigated abroad. We have had the European Commission even have a debate around it. My question is, as a country, how prepared are we that if all external funders pull out, we can still go on with ECOP? Thank you.
Yes, I think actually that is the last question. I take it that that's the last question.
Yes, I think it is.
And we shall start that answer straight away with that answer from Paul. We can start with Paul on that particular answer.
Okay.
Then we'll go to Ali.
Thank you very much. I think there is a big misunderstanding, I should say, and a challenge that the energy transition has been, climate change impacts have been attributed to fossil fuel production, there's a link. However, there is also a notion which says that two things. One, there will be emissions that arise out of oil production. But there are also mitigation measures that you can take to either decarbonize or control these emissions. What we have not done well is educate the public and the country about what are very high emissions. But what I should say is that for a country like Uganda, we are a very low emitter. We're almost at near zero in terms of our emission and mitigation. And so there's still some allowance for us to produce. The challenge is that the government was very slow to provide this information about what is happening around emissions and what is being done to mitigate it. And so it left a gap for other partners to start talking that actually we're going to boil. As a result, of course, there were concerns from funders and other people about the impact of the project on emissions and climate change and all that. I think the reality is that the oil sector will create emissions, but it's not very much. That's one. Two, which I understand from the partners, that there are already moves to help mitigate that and decarbonize the sector. But so that created a challenge of funding. And funding is very important because as a government, we don't have enough money to enter into these infrastructure projects. But there are still opportunities to get funding because these projects are profitable and a number of funding entities. I mean, right now, government has come out, which is good, and explained this situation and put up all these mitigation measures. And so now I think there's a big discussion with many funding entities to prove that actually government is taking this into consideration. And I think funding is coming into the country in order to undertake this project. Without external funding, I think the government will still struggle because it can borrow, but interest rates are quite high. And it doesn't manage very well some of these projects. So we need private sector to come. They have the expertise and resources. So I think we need to continue to work with government to explain this situation and help to, to present a better picture to the world. I think that's where the problem came. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much, Paul. Maybe we move to, actually, let's come like that so we can end with Ali since most of the questions were for him. So Sandra, I think, was it opportunities or what you did? I don't know which one it was. I think opportunities.
Okay. I'll talk a little bit about opportunities that could be available for lawyers. Was it in the energy transition or just the oil industry in general?
The oil industry, for us young lawyers also.
Oh, okay. I think the opportunities are very many. There is, of course, as lawyers, advisory is always required. So from just helping companies navigate the regulatory landscape, that the industry is heavily regulated with complex laws. Okay, maybe Ali would say they're not complex, but there are very many laws. There's upstream laws, midstream laws, environmental laws, tax laws, employment laws, and national content laws. All those need legal support to help your clients to interpret and apply those laws so that they are compliant in their operations. Then, if we talk about it from the energy transition perspective, green financing, like Paul has just touched on, investment needs to come into the country. If you're thinking about not just oil and gas, but even renewables. So helping the banking sector and financial clients to understand how they can support their clients as they are raising funds for investment in the sector, how they can make sure that they're also meeting their other targets, the environmental, social, and governance, the ESG agenda requirements, compliance requirements. Then generally in the oil sector, For instance, Ugandan companies are prioritized. So national content is a priority. So local companies will always be given priority for participating in tenders over international companies. So there's always an opportunity for helping to facilitate joint ventures between international companies who want to enter the country with local entities. So that's I think that's something that lawyers would be quite good at. Then providing consultancy on regulatory reform, and also providing general advice on contracting. When your clients have contracts, making sure that they'll be able to meet the obligations that are in the contracts, even supporting them through the tendering process, because some of the processes need some legal advice. So reviewing the contracts and then helping your clients to understand the terms and conditions that they're signing up to. So there are several opportunities for lawyers, really, and they should law firms that are interested in participating in the sector need to be following what's happening. There's, for instance, is an annual national content conference organized by PAU. There should be one coming up towards the end of the year. Right? Ali can guide on that. But then there's also quarterly supply development workshops for people who are interested in participating in upcoming contracts. They can follow up, attend those workshops. There's usually one every quarter by all the different oil companies. So attend those, find out what's happening. Opportunities are always advertised in the newspapers. So if there's a tender coming up, you can look out for it, and maybe you have a client who can meet the requirements. So you help them through the application, the tendering process. And then, of course, the sector has a lot of expatriates. So advising on work permits and immigration laws, and employment requirements. The oil sector has created a lot of employment, from casual workers to highly skilled employees. So all the contractors need support with making sure that they're complying with the employment laws. So guiding them, helping them to make sure that they're not breaching those laws, and that they are respecting people's employment rights, and then also making sure that helping the companies that need to bring in expatriates to get work permits, and also generally helping contractors to be compliant with all the laws that operate in the sector. I think those are very many opportunities. So, yeah.
Thank you very much. So be available, read, attend conferences, be serious. So young lawyers, therefore, are supposed to grow up. Barbara, you have been at the top of the oil and gas industry in Uganda for the better part of a decade. I think that's correct.
Yeah, it is.
You have been the boss in Talo, the boss in UNOC, the boss in ECOP. You are the deep state of the oil and gas industry. So tell us, what can we do so we can become like you? When we grow up, we want to be like you. What do we have to do? You are the correct person to answer that question, actually. And it was a very good question, because we have the person.
I'll attempt to answer that question, but probably the focus will not be on me. But I would want to say that today, employers, when they're recruiting, they look at the attitude. It's not much to do with what are your qualifications. When I joined oil and gas, I had no master's in oil and gas. But I positioned myself in such a way that there are other elements related to oil and gas sector, which all of us have been taught in school. For example, oil and gas is not an isolated area that the only thing you're concentrating on is the drilling. No. There is issues around land, there are issues on environment, there are issues on employment, immigration, tax. It's an alley of many elements of the law, which law all of us have been taught. When I was doing my clerkship with Nangwala Resida, I remember Mr. Nangwala Resida continuously used to remind us that those ones who will not get opportunities are those ones who don't want to transition from being students and concentrating on the little areas we have taught them and don't want to learn anything new. So I made myself vulnerable that when I came out of Standard Chartered Bank, I knew I'm going into a new area and therefore it is going to be a steep learning curve. So you have to position yourself through reading, skilling yourself, retooling all the time. You have to expose yourself. Turn up. I would go for IBA, I would go for Uganda Law Society where they're talking about oil and gas and try to understand what literature do I have to look at for me to be able to get into that space. So the most important thing is the attitude. It's not the papers, the books you have studied, the subjects you have covered, because each element of law we're taught in school, we apply it today in our different spaces. It doesn't matter whether you're working for CAA and you're dealing with the planes and advising on that law, still the things you studied in school will be applicable. Where I work today, we seek out for office space. So things to do with leases will be important. But definitely you have to throw in the dipstick of understanding what are the dynamics in this oil and gas sector. We have been able to attract many people to the industry. We have interviewed and we have onboarded many young lawyers who have joined the oil and gas sector. And there are many others supporting from different angles. Either they are in the tax advisory areas where they are working with the likes of PwC, Ernst & Young, and many other firms, all accounting firms. So there are many people who are playing in this space. But what we need to also acknowledge, not everybody is going to work for an IOC, all work in Ministry of Energy, all work in Power, all work for Uganda National Oil Company, all ECOP. You can position yourself to be an advisor. You can position yourself to play in this space by doing different things. So there is a lot you can do, but I think for me, for the young lawyers, when I sat here yesterday listening to the advice that was being proffered to the young lawyers, is for us to think beyond just what we are taught, to try and learn a lot. Today, nobody taught us energy transition, but when the topic came on, everybody has got interested in it, and we're trying to understand the renewables. So let us read about hydrogen. What are those agreements, all contracts that are relevant for that space? So that when the next client comes in and they say they want to invest in hydrogen, you are available, you put up your hand and they say this is the only person who can be able, who is distinguished in this space. So positioning ourselves is us clamoring for more knowledge continuously, not necessarily for you paying for expensive masters, though they are very important also, but you can learn. You can learn through reading, you can learn through attending conferences, you can learn from different spaces, even seeking for attachments. We have had many people coming in as graduate trainees, but you have to be vulnerable enough to become a graduate trainee. If you're aspiring to earn 10 million as a graduate trainee, we can't afford that. But you come in with a hope that you're going to learn and we're going to expose you to a lot within that time, and you'll be able to utilize that knowledge in a different space. So in the nutshell, that's what I will say. Thank you.
I told you she was the right person to answer that question. Now, Ali, unfortunately, you have 5 minutes and you have the most questions. So I can rephrase them for you quickly. Isn't this money going to be stolen? Number 2, how are you protecting the jobs to make sure that expatriates who come go? Number 3, bidding. How are you making sure that the bidding is not favored, is not skewed against us? Number 4, local content. What are we doing about local content? Number 5, if there is no money given to ECOP, is the project going to close if there's no money going to the refinery? Number 6, are we steady? So I think I've summarized those questions. You can answer each of them in 1 minute.
Hello, you can hear me. Okay. 1, corruption. Let me start with that. corruption, from an institutional and legal framework, I think we've done our best. Because in 2013 up to 2015, we decided to make a new law and a new structure that divides roles and creates checks and balances. So there's a minister is in charge of licensing on advice of PAU. Then if she gets a license, she goes to cabinet for approval. The original law, it was one person doing everything. Then after you create PAU based on regulatory best practice as a regulator to regulate the licensed entities, and the law says our mandate is we are independent. It again says that if the minister is to direct you on anything, she should gazette it and first go to the public and say, I want to direct PAU to do the following so that you all know. So the regulator then becomes independent. Then after the minister is licensed, there's a regulator, you then create UNOC as a commercial arm. Now, none of us will touch that money. So my job is to be on the wellhead, on the sharing point, make sure that whatever is due to the country is secured. After I get that letter, I hand it over to UNOC. UNOC goes and trades it. After it has traded it, the law says that money doesn't go on the UNOC account. You create another account, which is called a petroleum fund, where they are not signatories. And that account, they cannot access it. They only retain a certain amount for their operations. After that account, we created another advisory board for investment for the petroleum fund, currently headed by Professor Sejaka, and independent people. And those people are supposed to decide what your money does. Now that structure is there. I think the question are the people that are going to go there. And those people come from this room. So if you are corrupt here and we put you there, you will find your way out. But in terms of the institutional setup, we've done it based on world class, and I think history will judge. The question comes to, I think, the first point for the young people and so on, and I think the gentleman from the CSOs that participate in this public space, because this is a public asset. No one should tell you this thing is for so and so, or there are people whose jobs are ring-fenced and so on. Participate at every level. If it's at that advisory committee, or go to parliament, because they are the ones who make the laws and make sure that when this resource, the money starts coming, you are part of the people protecting it. The second is on the national content. I would really want all of you, and I know you sit in different spaces, I see my colleagues from UNRA, from the other sectors, to interest yourself in the national content law that we have and the regulations. Why? Because I believe that if we replicated that model at SGR, and we've been talking to the SGR people in railway, we replicated it in roads, in electricity, and all the other major sectors, I think we can take our country forward. Because the presence of my sister here and the other sister of mine here is not by accident. It is because by law, we required that before you get any person, you come to PAU, one, demonstrate that you made a public advert, you ran it, and there is no Ugandan who is qualified for that job. We then realized later that they had started hiking the CVs, but also, and then coming back and say, these people are not around. We said, okay, before we even advertise, let's look at the CV. So you come and say, I want a chef. Okay, what is he going to cook? Is it Katogo? Okay. So does he need to have a master's from British Cooking Society? No. So as a result, we then closed that. Then after, because you have to bring a recruitment report, we then go through. You say, I didn't get a person. So what we did now, we have created the National Oil and Gas Talent Register, which I implore you to go on. Because when they bring the report, we again go on and say, okay, there was no one in your advert, but we see some Ugandans here. These 8, why don't you go and interview them? And then lastly, because the industry is new, we acknowledge that we are 50 years or 55 late. If the job is technical, we then accept that you will have a work permit, but for a certain period of time. Then we ask you to get us a person who is going to shadow you. After that period, that person will be able to take up. As a result, I always say numbers do not lie. From February 2022, when we had first oil, to date, we have 14,000 employees that have been employed directly in the sector that we directly regulate, and 95% of those are Ugandans. 95%. Because of that, even the other 5% is a transition plan. Employment. The industry is not a mass employer. We should all note that there are 2 types of industries. There are industries that produce for masses and those which are for mass production. And the difference is very clear. The oil and gas industry at its peak might take 40,000 people. But remember our unemployment rate, we are maybe close to 7 million people. So it's not a mass employer. It produces for the masses. It is going to bring money that can feed into the other sectors to enable us do it. So in terms of employment, it's not going to solve the unemployment question in this country, but we've started a project called interlinkages. How can the money from the sector help agriculture, help tourism, which are mass employers, so that we can all fit in? And how can it help the energy transition, which has now solar, hydrogen, hydropower, and nuclear? The young man who asked, what did we do? I was head of litigation in URA. Okay, so anyone would think, okay, you are on the top. But when I saw 2206, we have commercial oil, I said, okay, let me go and do something in oil. It's an individual decision. Today, we are doing a nuclear plant. You are all aware, it's public news. I don't know how many of you know nuclear law. Maybe you can put up your hands. Is there anyone? Maybe we have 3 people. Good enough. But what I'm saying is, when you look at the energy transition now, oil and gas is here, but all these other aspects that relate to the transition, they all have their unique laws. It is positioning. In terms of numbers for local content, Dorothy, today, 7.5 billion in contracts approved by PAU, 1.7 billion to Ugandans or Ugandan companies. The other thing is that Ugandans, most of them, even if we have 52 tribes, but most are like Baganda. The Baganda, when they are eating, they keep quiet. So the ones who are eating, they are all quiet. But 1.7 billion are contracts, which is around 20-something%. Our target is, if we can achieve 30 to 40%, we shall be doing well, because the industry is very technical and highly capital intensive.
Bidding.
The bidding, yes. I think it is unfair for me because the bidding rules are by CNOC and UNOC and Total. You should know, for those of you who are familiar with public procurement laws. So we have the PPDA laws for the assets forward, as we had planned. Lastly, in this energy transition, just to remind everyone that the fossil fuel discussion, the position we've taken at the COP now, I'm a negotiator, the last time we were there, is to acknowledge that yes, fossil fuels have caused a problem, but we put a proposal on the table. I think what he calls a just energy transition. What we said is that it should be fast in, fast out. America, UK, US, who have been polluting and producing for the last 100 years, should first stop before anyone comes.
I think our time is fast spent, but as you can see, we had a fantastic panel. And if you could join your hands with me for that fantastic panel. As you can see, we are moving full speed ahead. We cannot fail to raise that kamani. As you can see, you have to skill yourselves. As you can see, we need a just energy transition. As you can see, there are many opportunities for lawyers. And you can see that the people in this hall have been very privileged, like me, to listen to learned friends who are substantial, serious, full of grit, full of gravitas, completely knowledgeable, utterly wonderful to listen to, oozing knowledge, educating us, defeating ignorance, transitioning us from darkness to light. You will please join me giving them a serious round of applause. If you could increase the applause. And allow me now to hand over to the mighty, wonderful. Why are you moving behind? Simon. Oh, I don't know who I'm handing over. Allow me to hand over to the wonderful Simon Kagwanjala, one of Uganda's favorite journalists, most known faces, most interesting and intelligent people, a man who has interviewed me many times and who I can tell you asks the tough questions. So you people, you're lucky that I was the one moderating.
Wow. We give them a round. Meanwhile, members will be having a cocktail after here. It will be a moment of chilling. We've had 2 hectic days. We've been engaged in many professional ways. So we need to unwind as we bring the conference to a close. I believe there are quite a number of you who've had quite a great experience in this 7th annual law conference. Please share your experiences with the people who never attended. Special thanks to the virtual audience. They've been glued all throughout. You know, it's quite amazing. During the days of lockdown, some of us went into remote working, but you could turn on your Zoom, then you go and do your things. But the virtual audiences have really shown that they've been attentive. We got quite